1 week ago, the M2 MacBook Pro 14 fell into our laps. In that time, I've spent about 50 hours working and playing on this laptop. So in that week, how has it held up? Let's find out. Quick note before we jump into the video, nobody loaned, shipped, gave, or provided me this laptop. I purchased it wholly on my own. And, just for clarification's sake, this is the cheapest, big air quotes there, model that came in at $19.99. This has the 10-core M2 Pro processor, 16GB of unified memory, a 512GB solid-state drive, and a 16-core GPU. My process for this is pretty straightforward. I install my software like normal, and then I use whatever I'm going to talk about for the time specified. I take notes, and I report my opinions back to you. Pretty simple stuff. It's not rocket science. Moving back to the MacBook Pro 14, I find these new laptops, especially the 14-inch model, to be a perfect hybrid approach. You get all of the power of the big, beefy 16-inch laptops, but it comes in a compact size that's not all that much different from a previous MacBook Pro 13. So in the past week of use, what have I liked and disliked about the new 14? I guess the way that we'll rank these is by emotional impact of said observation, which unfortunately emotional impacts are generally negative, so I think we're gonna have to start off with a dislike and something that I seriously dislike about all recent Apple computers. I don't know what it is, and I was hoping it was a macOS Monterey thing that would be sorted out in macOS Ventura, which is the latest macOS. It's when you plug an external display to an Apple computer, and that external display is not an Apple branded display. It can be a right pain in the butt to get working. I used to have no problems with this, but ever since macOS Monterey, it's almost like I get to play a game of, will my monitor wake up today? Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, and all the time it sucks. When I plug this into my Apple Studio display that you see on the ground right over there, instantly wakes up, it's ready to go. It works perfectly, lightning fast. But any other monitor I use, be it LG, Samsung, or the other cheapo I have in the house, we get to play that very fun game. Now, I can't pinpoint if this is a problem with the monitors or a problem with the laptop, but seeing as how this problem only affects my Mac computers, I think I'm gonna err there. Thankfully, the next thing is something that I've liked. I continue to like the body and the shape of the MacBook Pro 14. If you remember, I thought the M1 MacBook Pro 14 was a fantastic option, especially when it started coming down in price, and yes, we will be talking about that much more later. I think they nailed this series of computer by getting a very powerful machine into a fairly small body. It's so much lighter than my MacBook Pro 16, it's so much easier to travel with, and it really kind of wholly fulfills the promise of a pro laptop. Now, whatever pro means to you, for me it just means, can I get desktop quality power without having to lug around a desktop in my backpack? Continuing on the body discussion, I really like the port selection here. This is pretty much everything you need to either use a computer as a travel laptop or to set it up on your desk without too much difficulty or needing to purchase accessories. You can have basically it all. HDMI, Thunderbolt 3, headphone jacks, it's all right there and provides a ton of usability. Plus, your ports aren't stacked onto one side, making this a much more useful purchase than the single-sided ports on the MacBook Air. I really wish they would separate those. It's not perfect, and I do wish they could find either a way to get a single USB-A port onto the body or give us an adapter in the box like Dell does, because the world of keyboards and mice, they haven't yet transitioned to USB-C, and work's gotta get done somehow, and most of my work uses a keyboard and a mouse. Continuing physically, I really liked the typing experience over the past week and the overall in-use feel of the M2 MacBook. Apple has really gotten down and almost perfected the laptop keyboard. Honestly, I cannot think of a brand that does it better. It's the perfect combination of soft yet crisp keystrokes that aren't exactly mechanical, but they don't feel too smushy either. I am kind of a mechanical keyboard snob. Look at all these. Right in this frame over here are like 10 mechanical keyboards. This works great. The display also continues to be pretty great year over year with good brightness, incredible sharpness, 120 Hz refresh rate. It just makes it feel smoother and faster to use, more so than if you were to get the fully upgraded M2 MacBook Air. This will just feel so much better, and I'm not sure that you could even get a better laptop screen anywhere else. Yes, you can get 4K, 6K options places, but like all of it together? All right, here's a dual-hatted one. I've liked and been pretty meh about the performance at the same time. The part I've liked is that for my own personal stress test, I used one of my weekly WoW Classic raids as a crucible of pain. And yes, I play way too much WoW Classic. I had the settings all maxed out and I spent about 2 hours straight running the game and assorted other background software at the same time on the M2 MacBook. I never had a frame rate problem. I never had an overheating problem. The fans did turn on and I could audibly hear them, but it was nothing like the sound of an Intel-based MacBook. This computer was able to hold a steady roughly 100 frames per second throughout my run, and honestly, I couldn't tell a practical difference between using this and using my regular PC that's at my feet here. Sure, the PC can hold over 150 frames per second for a RAID because I would hope so. It costs way more than the MacBook, it's much bigger, draws far more power, and it has a huge cooling system, so it should do better, but this held up pretty well. So as far as thermal issues or long-term stress performance goes, I think the MacBook holds up perfectly fine. The reason I met on the performance is while doing another one of my major computer tasks, video editing, I didn't exactly get the oomph I would hope for from a $2,000 machine. Running 4K 10-bit files gave me no issues while doing the processing, audio mixing, or color grading. That all worked perfectly smoothly, and this is still a great content creation machine. I'm also editing today's video on the laptop. It works really well. This might be one of the smoothest video editing experiences that I've had in a long time. That could be optimization on DaVinci's part, but overall thumbs up to both Apple and DaVinci. So you go back to watching the video, I gotta go back to making the video. But when I went to actually render those files, I would barely get double real-time rendering, which, yes, that's still pretty good, but that's either on par or worse than performance I get out of those previous machines. For this much money, and this newer, more powerful chip and bigger integrated graphics card, I kind of expected more. That has nothing to do with hard drive performance, because complaining about a modern solid-state drive or NAND-controlled drive is a non-controversy that I won't justify with more screen time. You can find all of my thoughts on that nonsense back in the M2 Air and Pro 13 videos. Okay, Gary, well that's all well and good for how you've enjoyed and not enjoyed using it, but would you recommend the M2 MacBook Pro 14? I guess my recommendation comes in two parts. One, in a vacuum, I think this is an incredible laptop. It's powerful, quiet, perfectly balanced between size and performance, and for what you get, I think it's reasonably priced. I would like to see a bump to a 1TB hard drive standard, but nobody really does this kind of power, this kind of big storage, this kind of memory, and this kind of build quality for that price. We can argue about Apple's pricing all day long, but legit, nobody does what we are kind of asking Apple to do here. But on the other hand, this laptop doesn't exist by itself. Heck, the whole M2 lineup doesn't exist by itself. It has a very hard job of following up the M1 machines, and it's made even harder because of how far ahead those computers were in their time. Especially because now those M1s are a little older. You can find them for amazing deals. Like, without really looking too hard, I found a refurbished base model M1 MacBook Pro 14 for $1539 from Apple, and those do get treated like they are brand new, by the way. I even found it for $1449 on Amazon, almost 25% cheaper than the M2 machine that replaces it. So is the M2 Pro 14 a faster computer? Absolutely. It's objectively faster. The GPU is bigger, the CPU is bigger, better. It's all faster than a previous model. But is it $400 or $500 better? That's personal preference, but I don't think so. I have a pretty hard time recommending any of the M2 laptops because yes, they are objectively better than previous models, but I don't think that little bit of objective power is worth spending money on unless you have a very specific need for it. And if you have that very specific need, you probably aren't listening to a guy called The Everyday Dad in the first place. You're gonna hear a repeated refrain that it's overall hard to recommend the M2 versions, except for that M2 Mini. That M2 Mini is... Ugh. But what about you? Is there something else you would like me to test out before the 1-month follow-up? Let me know in the comments below. And if you like this video, click here to see that real star of the M2 lineup, the new M2 Mini. Click, 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 click. Thanks for watching.